Good morning. As he said, I'm Al Nienhuis. I'm the sheriff of Hernando County, and I know that you all are going to be very disappointed in the fact that I didn't bring a PowerPoint today. I'm sure that you all have not seen in your college careers enough PowerPoints. Is that pretty accurate? Anyway, but I did bring some gifts. Now I do work for a governmental agency, so they're not real expensive gifts, but I do have a few of them. The first of which is going to be probably the best of them. It's a weather radio. And again, if there's ever bad weather, maybe on a Saturday morning at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning when all of you all are sleeping and something bad is happening, you can be woken up by the weather radio. And my question is, and also I got to do a little disclaimer here that there's a young lady in the audience who probably doesn't want me to point her out, so I won't say her name, but she's disqualified from answering this, as well as her friends sitting with her, because they may know the answer. Also, I'm sorry, I'll get you, just get with Amanda, we'll get you goodies later. Anyway, all kidding aside, also if you are in Mr. Moyer's class, Brian Moyer, if he specifically spoke about this, you're disqualified too, but he may not have. So if he hasn't talked about this, then you're eligible. And I'd like you to raise your hands, and I'll get a young lady here in the front row to assist me in handing this out. But anyway, the question is, and I want you to think about this for a second before you raise your hand, and what I'm going to have you do also is I'm going to have you stand up and say it nice and loud so everybody can hear it. When I talk to young kids, I always tell them there's 4 things that I think will help you with success. 3 of them are relatively easy, and most people know. The 4th one is a little more difficult, and I'll go through them very quickly, and that's math and logic and science and anything to do with logic and that type of thing, because I think it helps prevent you from being taken advantage of if you're good in math and logic. Reading, of course, because it doesn't matter what you want to learn about, you can do it if you're a good reader and an avid reader. I talked to them about keyboarding. My dad told me when I was in high school that I should take typing. We called it typing back when I was there, and I actually had a manual typewriter. Some of you have probably never seen that, but a manual typewriter that I started on, and that was one of the best advice he ever gave me, because it certainly helped me in my college career and in my profession. I can type faster than I can write. And last, and certainly not least, and probably the hardest one, is public speaking. Anytime you have an opportunity to speak publicly, I highly recommend it, because it is one thing that people, there's kind of a joke I heard one time that everybody knows what the number 1 fear is, right? I just said it, right? What is it? Public speaking, right? It's second only to dying, which the joke is that at a funeral you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So I thought that was kind of funny. But so I want you to stand up and answer it. And you know what? Most people get it wrong. So if you get it wrong, that's okay. But that question is, who do you believe the sheriff reports to? Another way to ask it is, who is my boss, or who are my bosses? If you think you know for a weather radio, raise your hand. I'll call on you. Yes, ma'am. Stand up and say it nice and loud.
The chief?
The chief. Nope.
Okay, I tried.
Nope. Close, and I'll tell you why it's not. The sheriff. Who thinks they know? Come on now. You all are educated individuals. Raise your hand. Oh, we have an adult here who may know. Okay. Stand up.
How about the Attorney General?
The Attorney General? No. The 2 I hear most frequently. Okay, in the back. Young man in the back. Second one in. Nice and loud. What?
The mayor.
The mayor. No, not the mayor either. Okay. So nice. Stand up and nice and loud for me. What's that? The people in the county. All right, very good. Amanda, you want to give that to the young lady back there? Very good. I report directly to the citizens. I don't report to the mayor. I don't report to a chief. I don't report to the governor. Now, the governor can remove a sheriff if a sheriff breaks the law. If I do something that's illegal or immoral or anything like that, the governor does have the authority to remove me from office and replace me, appoint a new sheriff. Of course, if I leave, if I decide on my own to leave the office, or if I pass away, the governor can appoint a new sheriff, as what happened with me about 4 years ago. The former sheriff became became a U.S. Congressman. He's Representative and former Sheriff Rich Nugent, and I was appointed to replace him by the governor. I don't report to the county commission. I do get my budget from them, and I won't go into all the details with that, but I work closely with them, but I don't report to them. They can't tell me what to do on a day-to-day basis. The only people who can tell me what to do on a day-to-day basis are the citizens of Hernando County, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I want to talk about is probably one of my favorite Bible verses when it comes to my profession. Now, there's a lot of favorite Bible verses, but when you're talking about law enforcement in particular, does anybody have any idea? I'll give away some more stuff here. Let's see. You all probably like Frisbees. It's not a super quality one, as I said, but it's not bad. Can anybody tell me what Romans 13 just generally talks about? Anybody have any idea? Okay, stand up and nice and loud.
Submitting to authority.
Very good. You want to give him a Frisbee there, Amanda? Okay, I'm gonna put a disclaimer in right now. I'm not responsible for any injuries that may happen during the course of this. Let me go ahead and read. This is the ESV version of Romans 13. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good. You will receive his approval. For he is God's servant. He is God's servant. We'll talk about that in a minute. For good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword in vain. And of course, when the Bible was written, the sword was the weapon that you were afraid of. They didn't have, obviously, firearms back then. The Roman sword was something that was feared throughout the whole world. So, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this you pay taxes, for authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. So it does talk about that, but we often skip over the part about being a servant. And I can tell you that our forefathers, using some very biblical principles, were very intelligent men, because I don't wake up. There is not a day that I go through, and usually within the first few minutes of opening my eyes, that I don't think about serving the public. Now, I'm not sure, forgive me for my ignorance, but is there a management track or a management degree here? Yes, no? Anybody in management take management classes? Okay, very good. Okay, you all. Is everybody all right out there? You're being awful quiet. I want some interaction. I want to make sure you're awake. Management. If you take management, you probably have learned about some management theories. One of which is called unity of command. Now, I may be stepping out on a limb here, but does anybody have any idea what unity of command means? I've got another Frisbee I can give you. Anybody know what unity of command is? Nobody wants to even guess? All right, unity of command basically says that if you have an organization and you hire people, or you have people in that organization, you should only give them one supervisor. And you could imagine if you came to work for me as a deputy and you had two sergeants. One sergeant might want you in Ridge Manor on the east side of the county doing traffic enforcement, and the other one might want you on the west side of the county over by the beach, maybe preventing auto burglaries. And you can't be two places at once. So unity of command says that each employee should only have one immediate supervisor. And if you could imagine how difficult it would be having two supervisors, it gives you a tiny indication of what it's like being sheriff. I have about 175,000 supervisors. It can be very difficult at times trying to keep 175,000 people not just happy, but accepting of what you do. So every morning I wake up thinking about that. And one of the verses that I think are a very good one that I looked up too is another one from Matthew 20, and I think there's a very similar one in Mark 45, and it basically says, it shall not be so among you, but whosoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever rather would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Again, our forefathers looked at biblical principles, and structured our government after that, because our president reports directly to the people, your sheriff does, and it can be trying at times. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to be sheriff, because I think that's important too. I have personal responsibility, and I usually illustrate that by civil liability, being sued. If a local police department does something that upsets somebody and they decide they want to sue, they typically do not sue the police chief. They don't even sue the police department, because the department is a department of a bigger organization, namely the city. They sue the city. If they do it appropriately, they sue the city. Now, if somebody in my organization, on the other hand, gets upset or does something that upsets a citizen, they don't sue the county, they don't sue the sheriff's office. Guess who gets sued? If you think you know who gets sued, raise your hand. I'll give you a flashlight. Yeah, I do, absolutely. You want to hand this? Oops, sorry. Thank you, ma'am. Here you go. This is for you. It's $1. No, okay. That's right. She's not 10 anymore. Anyway, we got to have a good time, right? Yeah, I get sued personally. It says John Doe versus Al Nienhuis in his capacity as sheriff. That can be a little ominous. Those of you who are being scared or are scared of being sued, if you want to get over that fear, I recommend becoming sheriff, because you will get over that fear fairly quickly of being sued. Sometimes it's for a good reason, and sometimes it's for a bad reason. And I have some jobs that are listed in statute as well as in common law that I'm responsible for. Some of those responsibilities, one of the biggest ones, is keeping the peace in the county. Now, I look at that as really being two jobs, because it's my job to keep people safe, but I think it's just as important to make the citizens feel safe. You can't really have one without the other and still do your job, because we could have the safest county in the world in Hernando, but if somebody's scared to leave their house, we're not doing our job. That's why we use things like Facebook and other social media and media releases to let the people know what we're doing, that we are really working hard to keep them safe. Of course, if they feel safe but they're not safe, we're not doing their job either. So our job is twofold on keeping them safe. So keeping the peace is one of my jobs. Another one that you might find interesting that's specifically assigned to the sheriff, it says in Chapter 30 in Florida statutes that the sheriff shall raise a firm hand against riots and unlawful assemblies. So if there's a riot in a Florida county, the primary responsibility of quelling that riot rests on the sheriff. It's also my job to keep the judges safe when they're sitting on the bench. As college students, you probably understand how important our criminal justice system is, and you probably are aware of some of the countries where judges are not safe. They are killed or threatened, and the whole system collapses because nobody wants to be a judge. And if you are a judge, you're certainly not going to hold anybody accountable for fear of being killed. I'm also responsible for serving civil process, making sure all the subpoenas, ex partes, injunctions, writ of replevins, and all those other difficult names to pronounce, make sure they get served. The easiest one you've probably heard of is a subpoena. If somebody wants you to show up in court, whether it's a defense or the prosecution or in a civil matter, we make sure that that subpoena gets served. We have also, in Hernando, taken over the jail. You might find it interesting, often in other states, and I know many of you are from other states and from the Northeast, the sheriff, their primary responsibility is the jail. In Florida, that's not the case. the jail really rests with the county commission. There's 5 county commissioners that are also elected, and their responsibility is the jail. But if the sheriff is willing to take on that responsibility and the county is willing to give it to him, the sheriff takes on that responsibility. So we have between 450 and 600 inmates that we have to maintain care, custody, and control of. It can be a very difficult process because they can't run to the 7-Eleven and get something. We've got to supply everything for them. We also in Hernando County have taken over animal services in the field, you know, basically the people who respond if there's a dog loose and so forth, and emergency management. Again, both of those are the county's responsibility, but because the sheriff's office does a fairly good job, they have given that to us and we're responsible for that. Now, talking about crime in Florida in general, crime is down. You may have heard that. It's at a 42-year low. We do have some challenges in law enforcement, not the least of which is mental health. It is a very, very difficult issue. And I think that kind of relates back to God and the devil. I think in law enforcement, there is no doubt, if you're a thinking person, that the devil is alive and well. And he does impact people's mental health, and it is a very, very difficult thing to deal with, people who want to harm themselves and so forth. We do a lot of things. I won't go into a whole lot of it, but I do want to talk about law enforcement. You know, law enforcement, we love to have people of faith, Christians, because I think it helps keep their compass pointed in the right direction. Because when you're dealing with some of the things we have to deal with, and I will tell you, there are some very, very, very tragic things we have to deal with. Recently, on Martin Luther King Day, as a matter of fact, I had just gotten done with a Martin Luther King Day parade, and I heard over the radio that there was an animal attack. A little toddler, you know, probably about 18 months old, was attacked by a couple dogs, pit bull mix, and was killed. And I was there when the mom got there. And if you don't, there is nothing more tragic than having to tell a mother that her toddler was just killed by a couple dogs. So it is a very tragic thing, but there is a lot of good. And we are able to do a lot of good. And we interact with people when they're at their very lowest time in their life. Because if they don't know who to call, guess who they call? We have a number that's very easy to remember, and it's open 24 hours a day. So they call 911 for just about everything. Sometimes it's humorous, but unfortunately, oftentimes it's not. It's very devastating for those people. But you know, we have an opportunity to go in, and we have to be careful. You know, our country was founded on freedom of religion, and we have to respect that. It's important to not, and I have a very vibrant chaplain program. Some of you may know that I think the gentleman who owns Chick-fil-A, John Minton, I think some of his children go here in Hernando County. Well, his father, John Minton Sr., is one of my senior chaplains, and he is very, very involved, does a great job, but we have to be cautious. We don't want to hurt our chances of ministering to people by stepping over the line. But I tell him all the time that if you are a friend to people internally and even people externally at times, if you build that relationship, there is a fertile field, both in the sheriff's office and obviously in the jail and in the community, people who definitely need God's salvation and the big picture that God provides into why we're here and the big picture of eternity. Let's see. I want to make sure that I don't push the time limit too much, but I will tell you, if anybody's interested in law enforcement, I know you have a criminal justice program here. I encourage you to get in, everybody except my daughter, encourage you to get into law enforcement. She's not interested anyway, which I thank the Lord for. But no, criminal justice is a very rewarding job. And it can be very frustrating at times having to deal with some of the things I talked about. But you know, there's a motto, and actually I think it's the Russian Special Forces, this is their motto. And boy, I think it is so applicable to law enforcement. And their motto basically is, if not us, who? In other words, if we don't deal with this, who will? And that's law enforcement. And you can go home at night, and I tell you, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't know that I made a difference. And I thank the Lord that He has given me the responsibility. One thing I do pray for often, though, is wisdom, because with that responsibility, you have to have a lot of wisdom, because there's a lot of decisions you can make, and oftentimes, no matter which way you go, things could go wrong. But I pray for that wisdom, and I thank for the responsibility. And I invite you, if any of you are interested, I'll do a little bit of recruiting here. A little footnote. If anybody's interested, don't ever hesitate to get in touch with me. You can either call my office or get in touch with me through my daughter. We would love to sit down and talk with you about you can talk to Raina too, by the way. I don't want her. She's kind of my surrogate daughter, I guess, or whatever. She's usually they're inseparable. But all kidding aside, we'd love to have you if you're interested, because we can use all the Christians we can possibly get, because it's a very important job with a lot of responsibility. I know my time is just about up. I know I don't want to push it, but I'm going to hang around for a few minutes if anybody has any questions or any concerns. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed the talk. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully we had a little bit of a good time. I know a couple people are leaving with a couple things. And if you come up, I have some extra stuff that I'd prefer not to take back. So if you come up and ask me a couple questions that are really good, I think I have a radon gauge and a flashlight I can probably get you. But thank you for your attention. You've been a great group. I really am humbled and honored to be here. And some of you, I guess I'll see later tonight. Thank you. Have a good day.